Hi and welcome to another story, and today we have part 1 of The Worst Witch Saves the Day by Jill Murphy, starting from chapter 1. Tropical sunshine beat down on the pupils of Miss Cackle's Academy for Witches as they arrived in the schoolyard on the first day of winter term. Only the first years entered the school on foot, as they had not learnt to fly yet, but all the other pupils, and of course the teachers, soared over the high stone wall on their broomsticks like a flock of crows, a spectacular sight to see. The school year was divided into 2 long terms, instead of the usual 3, so the weather conditions were often mismatched to the girls' uniforms at the very beginning of term. This is just typical, thought Mildred Hubble, wriggling her toes uncomfortably inside thick grey socks and heavy winter boots. When we came back for summer term, it was snowing, and we were all frozen to death in our summer dresses. Mildred was beginning her 3rd year at Miss Cackle's Academy. She was relieved to be coming back at all, after an accident-prone 2 years under the beady eye of the blood-curdling Miss Hardbroom, or HB as the girls called her, who had been Mildred's form mistress for both of those years. However, this term, Mildred felt much more confident. During the summer break, she had been on a special 2-week broomstick crash course, a rather unfortunate description in Mildred's case, and had received a broomstick proficiency certificate and a smart new broom from her mum as a reward. Sadly, her cat Tabby, who was the only tabby cat in the school, all the rest being regulation black ones, had not improved very much. In fact, at all, if one was to be truthful. Of course, she had got used to flying after 4 terms' practice. Bertie still hated it, and always crouched down on the back of the broom in a guinea pig-like hunch, or worse, completely flat, so that he could hang on better. However, he was a very affectionate and cuddly cat, just the sort to curl up with on a freezing night at the stone-built, draughty school, and Mildred loved him with all her heart. Mildred zipped over the school wall without wobbling, despite the heavy luggage hanging from the back, and coasted to a halt near the broom shed. "Not bad, Mildred Hubble," said a sneery voice from the gloomy interior. "Had a brain transplant during the holes, did you?" "Oh, hello, Ethel," said Mildred without enthusiasm, as she peered in and saw who it was. Ethel Hallow was the top student in Mildred's class. She was brilliant at every subject, including popularity with the teachers, which had unfortunately gone to her head and given her a tendency to belittle her classmates. Mildred's lack of ability in all directions had made her Ethel's #1 target since their very first term. Mildred unhooked her luggage and clipped her broomstick into the rack below her name. It always pleased her to see her name waiting for her at the beginning of a new year, above her coat peg and broomstick clip, and on her bedroom door, as if everyone expected her to come back as a matter of course. "Mildred Hubble," it proclaimed, as if she was important in the world. "Nice broom," said Ethel. "Pity to waste it on someone like you." "Don't start, Ethel," warned Mildred. "Start what?" exclaimed Ethel loudly, in an innocent tone. "Honestly, Mildred Hubble, you're so touchy." Mildred made her way out into the yard and scanned the groups of girls for her friends, for one of her friends. "Maud, is that you?" she called, as she suddenly realised that the smiling person running towards her was her best friend, with her hair in curly bunches instead of the usual straight ones. "Of course it's me," laughed Maud. "Do you like the hairdo? My aunt gave me a brilliant stylish brush. You just turn it on for a bit, roll up your hair in, abracadabra, your hair's all curly. You can have a go if you like." "Thanks, Maudie," said Mildred. "Oh, it's so nice to see you again. It's the only thing that makes this school worthwhile, knowing you're in it with me." "Well, I'm not going anywhere else for the next several years," said Maud. "So, we're well and truly in it together, as long as you don't go and get yourself expelled." "No chance," said Mildred. "I'm going to be the best witch in the world this term. Just you wait and see. Look, isn't that Enid landing by the wall? And there's the bell. Let's go and see who we've got this year. It can't be HB again." Chapter 2. It wasn't HB, much to Form 3's utter joy. It was a new teacher, named Miss Granite. "Welcome, girls," said Miss Cackle, smiling fondly at her flock of pupils, all lined up in orderly rows in the yard. "I hope you've all had a wonderful summer holiday and are rested and ready for some hard work, especially our new pupils. Don't worry, girls, it won't be long before you're all doing loop-the-loops around the bell tower." Miss Hardbroom raised a disapproving eyebrow at Miss Cackle's light-hearted attempt at friendliness, and the new girls looked more anxious than ever, as they were not sure whether to laugh or to look serious. Although Miss Cackle was the headmistress of Miss Cackle's Academy, Miss Hardbroom had somehow risen through the ranks of the teachers to be an unofficial second-in-command, who seemed more in charge than the headmistress. Because of this, the girls were always caught nervously between Miss Cackle's kindliness and Miss Hardbroom's overriding disapproval. Miss Cackle gave up her attempt at joviality and handed the morning over to Miss Hardbroom. "Now then, everyone," she said, in a rather crestfallen voice, "I'll leave it to Miss Hardbroom to introduce our new form teacher and to give out any announcements before you go and unpack your belongings. I'll see you all at assembly afterwards." "Thank you, Miss Cackle," said Miss Hardbroom, with a nod in the headmistress's direction, as the girls all stood in line, gasping in the heat. "Now then, Form 3, this is your new form mistress, Miss Granite. But put your hat back on, Enid Nightshade. It isn't that hot. Goodness me, you're all so feeble these days, always complaining about something. Either it's too hot or it's too cold. No backbone at all, no gumption." Miss Granite gave a little cough. "Ah, yes, girls," continued Miss Hardbroom. "Please greet Miss Granite in a courteous and friendly manner." "Good morning, Miss Granite," chanted the whole class, trying to sound courteous and friendly. As Miss Hardbroom gave out various announcements, Form 3 gazed in amazement at their new form mistress. She was very strange looking. For a start, she had a huge cloud of bright orange curls, which looked extremely frivolous for Miss Cackle's academy. In fact, everything about Miss Granite looked frivolous to the pupils, condemned as they were to black gym slips, thick wool socks and hobnail boots. She wore enormous purple-tinted glasses and a short cape, and a collar turned up so high that you couldn't see much of her face at all. "She looks as if she's been at your styling brush," whispered Mildred to Maud, who giggled. "Mildred Hubble, if you have something amusing to say, perhaps you could share your little joke with the rest of us," snapped Miss Hardbroom. "I'm sure we could all do with a little merriment on the first day of this long winter term." "Sorry, Miss Hardbroom," mumbled Mildred, blushing scarlet as the rows of assembled girls, plus all the teachers, turned to look at her. "Well, Mildred," said Miss Hardbroom, "we're all waiting." I've forgotten," said Mildred desperately. "It probably wasn't all that funny anyway. I really can't remember." Miss Hardbroom turned to Miss Granite. "And this is Mildred Hubble," she announced. "It's a bad sign when you can't remember anything on the very first day of term, before lessons have even started. This, I might add, is typical of Mildred Hubble, and you would do well to keep an eye on her." At this point, the girls heard Miss Granite's voice for the first time. It was so astonishingly high-pitched and squeaky that it was hard for them not to react, and even Ethel looked startled. "Oh, I will, Miss Hardbroom," squeaked Miss Granite. "I most certainly will." Mildred glanced at Enid, and the two of them suddenly felt a dreadful surge of hysteria. Maud gave Mildred a severe look as her friend grimaced with the effort of not bursting into giggles. "Stop it, Mill," she whispered. "Don't get off on the wrong foot with this one. It's your chance to make a fresh start." Chapter 3. The girls set off to put their suitcases and cats into their rooms, and to get themselves tidied up before assembly, which was held in the great hall. Mildred was delighted to find that she now had 6 bats roosting along her picture rail, instead of the usual 3. She was mad about animals, and although the bats didn't do very much except sleep all day, occasionally stretching a wing or shuffling along a bit, it was nice to know that they were there. In the early hours, when Mildred was often lying awake, worrying about a looming potion test or some similar horror, it was always comforting to see her little flock come in from their night's hunting and jostle into position, upside down. It only took a few minutes for Mildred to unpack her suitcase and put away her clothes, so she decided to nip along the corridor to Maud's room. "Have you got that styling brush, Maud?" she asked, letting herself in through the heavy oak door. "I'd like to have a little twirl with it, see if I can liven up my hair a bit." Maud was still cramming her clothes into her tiny wardrobe. All the pupils had a wardrobe, with space on one side for the robes and shirts and a narrow set of drawers on the other side, which was not big enough to take a term's supply of socks and underclothes, and was therefore very difficult to keep tidy. "Of course you can, Mildred," said Maud cheerily. "It's on the bed there. Just push up the switch on the side, and it makes a hissing sound, and then gets warm in a few minutes." "Thanks, Maudie," said Mildred. She was about to close the door as she left the room when Enid came up behind her. "I'm just going in to have a chat with Maud," said Enid. "Coming?" "Not yet," replied Mildred. "I'm going to have a go at beautifying myself with Maud's magic brush here," and she skipped off down the corridor, back to her room. "What do you make of our new form mistress, then?" asked Enid, settling on the end of Maud's bed, with her knees pulled up under her chin. Maud stuffed the last pair of grey and black striped pyjamas into the bottom drawer and closed the wardrobe door. "She's a bit weird looking, isn't she?" said Maud. "I'm surprised HB let her over the doorstep. She's so everything HB can't stand, isn't she? Nervous, twittering, doesn't look as if she could control a dead budgerigar, and that funny little voice, and all those frivolous curls. Enid laughed. "Come on," she said. "Let's go and help Mildred with her hair." "Yes, let's," said Maud, heading for the door. "I meant to warn her to be careful. It's really easy to get the brush tangled if your hair's long." Chapter 4. Maud and Enid pushed open Mildred's door. "Be careful with the brush, Mildred," said Maud. "It's easy to—" She stopped abruptly as she saw Mildred sitting on her bed with the styling brush and her hair rolled up in a great messy loop right against her scalp. She was desperately trying to unroll it, but the brush was held as tightly as a fly parcelled up in a spider's web. "It's got stuck, Maud," said Mildred, trying not to cry. "I mean, really stuck. I've turned it off, but it's still burning hot. And the brush is black, so you can't see where the hair ends and the brush begins." "Don't panic, Mildred," said Enid, trying to sound soothing, despite the horrified tone in her own voice. "That's right," said Maud. "Just leave it and let Enid and me sort it out. Bend your head towards the window so we can see what you're doing." Mildred bent her head so that Maud and Enid could access the situation. It was not good. In the dim light filtering through the narrow castle window, they could see that Mildred had twirled up a large hank of her waist-length hair, which had spiralled around the brush into a hopeless tangle. Maud and Enid exchanged appalled glances. They looked even more horrified when the bell for assembly began to clang urgently through the corridors. "Oh no," said Mildred, bursting into tears. "Why on earth do these things always happen to me? I can't go down to assembly like this. HB will go bonkers." "Hang on, Mildred," said Maud, jumping up. "Perhaps I can find someone to help." She opened the door just as Ethel Hallow was walking past. Ethel looked in at Mildred. "Oh dear," she said. "What have you done now?" "Don't be horrible, Ethel," said Enid. "This is really bad news. Mildred's got Maud's styling brush stuck in her hair. It'll take all day to untangle. It's really serious." To everyone's surprise, Ethel looked suddenly genuinely concerned. "Sorry, Mildred," she said. "Of course it's awful, but luckily I know just what to do. Hang on a sec." She went over to the window in an unauthoritative manner, bent Mildred's head towards her, and began busily working on the hair and brush as if she knew exactly how to help. No one could quite see what she was doing, and by the time they realised it was too late. Ethel had taken a pair of scissors from the jar on Mildred's windowsill and cut the brush out of Mildred's hair, leaving a tuft about 3 centimetres long and 10 centimetres wide. "Ethel," exclaimed Maud and Enid together, "you are unbelievable. Look what you've done." Mildred leapt up, feeling the space where the brush had been, and rushed to look in the mirror, which hung just below the bats. "Oh no," she cried. "I look completely mad, Ethel." "Well, you asked me to help," said Ethel, sounding offended. "No, I didn't," snapped Mildred hotly. "You just barged in here and hacked a huge lump of my hair off." "I thought you'd be pleased," said Ethel, trying to sound friendly. "You couldn't have gone to assembly, as it was, and you'd never have untangled it, not in a million years. Come on, I'll tidy up the rest of it so it doesn't notice. Well, it doesn't notice so much. I'm really good at hairdressing. I did a course last year. Quick, or we'll all be late for assembly." Chapter 5. "What on earth have you done to your hair, Mildred Hubble?" exclaimed Miss Hardbroom, as Form 3 trooped into the great hall for the first day assembly. Mildred's hair now resembled a haystack after a night in a Force 9 gale. She was very tearful. Ethel had cut the hair roughly in different lengths to just below her ears. In some cases it was so close to her scalp that there were bald patches showing through. "I got a styling brush stuck in it, Miss Hardbroom," sniffed Mildred. "And I cut it off for her, Miss Hardbroom," simpered Ethel. "She was really upset, so I tried to shape it into a style for her, to neaten it up." "Well, let that be a lesson to you, Mildred," said Miss Hardbroom. "Trying to do your hair in unsuitably frivolous styles. No good can ever come of all this preening and primping. I'm always warning you girls, but do you ever listen? My goodness, Miss Granite will have her work cut out with you in her class." She turned away and dismissed the subject of Mildred's hair from her mind. Mildred, however, couldn't think of anything else. Her long hair had been such a part of her daily routine, plaiting it each morning and brushing it each night. In fact, she hadn't realised quite how upset she would feel at the prospect of presenting herself to the world without it. "I wish I could turn the clock back," said Mildred glumly, when they had finally been allowed to take their lunch break after 2 hours of assembly with Miss Cackle droning on about the joys of the academy, and Miss Hardbroom grimly reminding the pupils of the high standards and traditional values expected of one and all. Form 3 hastily stuffed down their swede and cabbage risotto and rushed out to sit in the yard for half an hour of sunshine before they were trapped with Miss Granite for the rest of the day. "Don't keep thinking about it, Mildred," said Maud kindly. "It won't take long to grow again. Well, it'll be quite a while, but it'll only be for a few weeks before it loses that just cut look. Because perhaps I could try and neaten it up a bit." "I'd rather you didn't," said Mildred hastily. "I don't want to lose any more, if you don't mind. Thanks all the same." "I think he looks quite cool, actually," said Enid, ruffling the top of Mildred's head. "It's quite fashionable to have that hacked-off look at the moment." "Just shut up, Enid, okay?" said Maud, seeing Mildred's shoulders hunch up around her ears. "Let's try and change the subject, shall we? I wonder what it's going to be like with Miss Granite for the year." "Anything will be better than HB," said Mildred. "Nothing could be worse than another year of traditional values and always being wrong, however hard you try. Even if she does seem a bit weird, Miss Granite looks quite sweet, really. What you can see of her. The only bit you can really make out is her nose. Anyway, we'll find out what she's like any minute now. We've got double potions with her when the bell goes." When the girls filed into the potion lab at the end of break, Miss Granite was already there, opening all the windows to let some air into the hot and stuffy room. Textbooks were laid out on the desks, and everyone settled themselves onto their stools and looked up expectantly at their new teacher. "Good afternoon, girls," said Miss Granite in her squeaky voice, which seemed to have gone up an octave since they heard her in the playground that morning. "I'd like you to take it easy this afternoon. You may all look through the Year 3 Spell Sessions Handbook, find some spells which may be of interest to you, and learn them by heart. You can try out a few if you like. Now, you're in Year 3. I don't expect to be telling you what to do all the time." The girls felt rather confused. Miss Hardbroom never allowed them to do anything at all without hours of instruction and warnings of dire consequences if they didn't read every paragraph 15 times. "Excuse me, Miss Granite," said Ethel, putting up her hand. "Is there any particular spell you might like us to study?" "Not really," squeaked Miss Granite vaguely. "Whatever interests you, dear." And to Form 3's utter amazement, Miss Granite took out a long bundle of grey knitting from her desk and began to knit in a most intense manner. The girls sat with their mouths open, left completely to their own devices. "This is really bizarre," whispered Maud to Mildred. "Perhaps it's always like this in Year 3, said Enid. "You know, more relaxed." "I think it's brilliant," said Mildred. "Just doing stuff on your own, working at your own pace. Suits me. I'm going to see what I can find out in our new Year 3 spell book." Everyone except Ethel seemed to quite enjoy the new arrangement. Ethel was one of those rare people who thoroughly enjoyed exams, and rotas, and carrying out detailed instructions which she had grimly studied beforehand. It didn't seem right to be looking up any spell she felt like, while the decidedly odd Miss Granite sat knitting at her desk, resembling an overgrown shrub, not teaching them anything at all. The rest of the girls quickly adapted to the new laid-back teaching style and leaned on their desks, chatting about the holidays or doodling on their rough notebooks. Enid and Maud were boldly playing a spirited game of noughts and crosses, best of 10, on the cover of Maud's potions exercise book. Only Mildred was actually doing some work. She had found a chapter completely devoted to a spell to generate growth, and she immediately began to wonder if she could use it to repair the damage to her hair. It was a very complicated spell, full of unintelligible formulae, and maths was never Mildred's strong point. She glanced up at Miss Granite, who was half hidden by her hair and turned-up collar and the ever-growing pile of knitting. "Excuse me, Miss Granite," said Mildred, putting up her hand. "Could you help me with this regrowth spell?" Miss Granite turned her head in Mildred's direction, knitting needles still busily clicking. "Just look it up in your dictionary, a formula, dear," she replied. "You have got one, haven't you?" "Yes," said Mildred, "but it's a bit complicated." "Well, it's about time you know how to do things for yourself, dear," squeaked Miss Granite. "Now you're in Year 3, I don't want you bothering me every 5 minutes. "Sorry, Miss Granite," muttered Mildred. "Perhaps I can help you, Mildred," said Ethel, leaning over Mildred's shoulder. "What's the problem?" "It's all right, Ethel," said Mildred guardedly. "I can work it out by myself." "Thanks." "Oh, go on, Mildred," wheedled Ethel. "I'm really good at maths, and it's a bit boring, with no proper lesson today. I'm sure I could help." The most annoying thing about Ethel was her ability to convince you that she might just this once be truly sorry about whatever unpleasant thing she'd done recently and was actually going to make amends. Mildred fell for it every time. "Well," she said in an uncertain voice, "it's this regrowth spell. Look, there are 6 pages telling you how to make it up. I can get the part about the ingredients, tendrils of parthenosis and 16 dewdrops from a spider's web, without breaking the strands, that sort of stuff. But I can't understand all these formulae, and it won't work unless you can understand the whole thing. Easy peasy, smiled Ethel. I can do this standing on my head. Is it for your hair? Mildred nodded. Well, budge up, said Ethel, smiling happily. It's the least I can do after making you look like a scarecrow, though I was only trying to help you out of a jam. Thanks, Ethel, said Mildred. It's really good of you. Don't mention it, smiled Ethel. And that is where we will leave part 1 of The Worst Witch Saves the Day by Jill Murphy. I'll be back soon with the next part of this fantastic story, and lots more stories and videos coming your way very soon on my channel. If you'd like to subscribe or hit a like, that's always appreciated. Thanks for listening, guys. Take care. Bye-bye.